5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey, space enthusiasts. In this episode, we are talking about analyzing satellite imagery for interesting use cases here on Earth. Our guest is Jakub Dziwisz from the startup Orbify. Their platform aims to make it really easy to deploy apps that take advantage of satellite imagery for use cases such as, for example, tracking, deforestation, and many others. Hear more about it in the episode. Now, as usual, a couple of short messages from our sponsors, and then please enjoy my conversation with Jakub.
My name is Raphael Rodkin, and I'm an investor and advisor to space companies. Just as a reminder, this podcast is for informational purposes only, and nothing should be taken as investment advice. This podcast is sponsored by Nano Avionics, a satellite manufacturer and mission integrator. Their technologies enable many space companies worldwide to offer services that improve life right here on Earth, such as providing global connectivity, conducting Earth observation, or contributing to scientific discoveries. Check them out, and also check out my episode with their CEO and co-founder. Sadly, I am not a rocket scientist, but I'm an alumnus of the International Space University. ISU offers a number of educational programs about space worldwide. Check them out at isunet.edu.
And just some final things before we start the episode about ourselves. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platforms such as Apple or Spotify. If you want us help expand our work, you can do so and support us at www.patreon.com/Space Business Podcast, and we'll also put that link in the episode notes. And lastly, you can follow us on Twitter at podcast_space.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Today I'm with Jakub Dziwisz, who is the CEO and co-founder of Orbify. Welcome, Jakub.
Hello, Raphael. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here. It's a really great pleasure and honor to be on your podcast.
It's a pleasure to have you. Why don't you start, as usual, giving us sort of the elevator pitch on your company?
Sure thing. So Orbify is a web platform that makes it easy to build Earth intelligence applications. Earth intelligence applications turn Earth observation and geospatial data into insights for ordinary people. So the problem that we want to solve is that if you are an entrepreneur, if you are a consultant, Earth observation consultant that wants to build something for your users, product for your customers, you run into the problem of harnessing a lot of different dependencies. So if you want to build, let's say, a solution that makes it easy for a farmer to monitor how their crops are growing, then you need to, of course, build image processing, image recognition software that will be able to calculate indexes like NDVI, etc. Right? This is the basic thing, but then things start becoming difficult because you will want to deploy your software into the cloud because, one server, even EC2 allocated in AWS isn't enough. If you have bigger traffic, you will need to be able to auto-scale. So some proper integration with the cloud is necessary. And then if you are building a solution for a real farmer, then the user interface needs to be easy, right? So you're running into challenges of building React interface that is very accessible for people that don't have time to reading big manuals. And then, as an entrepreneur, if you are building a commercial solution, you will probably want to integrate with Stripe, PayPal, Auth0 to make sure that you are properly authenticating, billing, charging your customers. And of course, this is just half of the problem, because the other half is literally above our heads, right? All the satellite constellations orbiting the Earth. This is really great that there is more than 1,000 satellites collecting gigabytes of data every minute. At the same time, getting access to the data isn't easy, right? So you and your listeners know how difficult it may be to to get data even from freely available sources like Sentinel or Landsat mission, right? So all in all, if you want to build even simple app based on Earth observation data, you will have to invest a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money into making it possible. And we believe that this should be easy, this should be simple, and this is why our platform serves as an abstraction layer over all of those dependencies, making it possible, making it a one-stop shop to create fully fledged products based on Earth observation geospatial data.
Jakub, I'm like sort of scared now. Basically, it sounds like every single part of the process is complicated, like getting the data, sort of wrangling, processing it, then deploying the algorithm in the cloud. So why don't you walk us through, I mean, you mentioned the farmer. Why don't you walk us through a use case, like an actual use case? And that can be the farmer, it could be some other industry, sort of like, let's say somebody comes to you and they say, I have somebody who's not from the space industry, right? Like a real customer. Yeah. And let's say it's the farmer. Why not? They say, okay, I want to understand the health of my crops in my fields. Take us through sort of like step by step, how the process works.
Sure. So actually, the platform is based on a couple of problems that we were solving at the beginning of existence of Orbify as a venture. And there were a couple of use cases that we had to solve. So sticking to this farmer example, at the beginning, we worked with an Earth observation consulting company that had a client. Let's say it's a farmer, right? And the client, the farmer, comes to this Earth observation consulting company and tells them, "Hey guys, I really appreciate the reports you are generating. They are very accurate. You are able to really precisely forecast soil moisture, soil organic matter content, a lot of other parameters that make it easy for me, a guy who owns several acres of land, to monitor health of my crops. However, I would like to be able to monitor it on a continuous basis, right? Every day, I would like to be able to wake up from my laptop, log into a web application and see whether everything is fine, or maybe we need to take care of irrigation or put some fertilizers into the ground."
You have like a dashboard of sorts.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I'm a farmer that I would like to have a dashboard, right? And then the farmer told this to our friends from Earth Observation Consulting Company, and they are, on the one hand, they are very happy, right? Because there is a customer, we can build a product, and then if we have a product for this one farmer, then there will be another farmer, a lot of potential users for our application. On the other hand, they got a bit scared because it was just the beginning of their potential problems, because they have algorithms that they usually run on their computers, right? So these are Earth observation consultants, people who are very deep into geophysics and remote sensing and algorithms. So they understand Python, Pandas, other software, Snap toolkit, of course, to process data. And they can easily generate very accurate PDF reports, PowerPoint presentations, right? But if it is about building a product, a web application, then this is a totally different thing. It requires you to know a lot about cloud computing, a lot about web interface development, and you need to understand a little bit about UX and UI design, etc., etc. Right? So they got a bit scared and they approached me. "Hey, Jakub, could you help us?" And actually, that was the beginning, right? Because learning from them. Okay, so you are trying to solve these problems. You need to get data. You need to be receiving data from a couple of constellations, because you have diversified requirements, some optical, some multispectral, and some radar data as well. We need to build a couple. We need to build a couple of integrations, and then we need to build this sort of user interface UI, a dashboard that allows the farmers to monitor the crops. And then you need to deploy all of those things into the cloud, because images can be several gigabytes big, right? So a laptop or even an instance of a machine rented somewhere in the cloud is not sufficient. So we need auto-scaling, adding more machines to the cluster as they are needed. So all of those things need to be solved, right? And then when we solved it once, we understood that this is a little bit repetitive process. Because if you have another customer that comes to you and say, hello, I would like to monitor a part of a sea to see whether there are any dark vessels, right? Then the drill is similar. You need to get images from providers, this time maybe not multispectral, but radar and a little bit of optical data may be necessary, and a little bit of AIS, right? This vessel location, vessel anti-collision system, AIS, that transmits vessel's position. You collect the data, you process the data, you need cloud again. You need user interface again. This could be a little bit similar, right? Because whether we are visualizing crops or vessels in the sea, this is still a map on which we are drawing some shapes and then a couple of diagrams. So there are similarities there. And you need things like PayPal, Stripe to enable those people pay you on a regular basis, right? And then if you are working with a forester, well, the problem repeats itself, right? The forester also wants to monitor health of the forest, biomass, whether area is not decreasing, whether NDVI is normal, etc., etc. So it's, again, very similar. You need to download the data, you need to process the data in the cloud, you need to visualize it nicely. Again, a couple of maps and a couple of diagrams, and Stripe, PayPal, etc., etc. So use case after use case, we were seeing that although among domains, industries, there are a lot of differences. On the algorithm level, there are a lot of differences, right? There is detecting vessels is totally different from detecting soil moisture. But when you are looking at this application development, software engineering aspects, they are very similar. So this is the foundation. This is the foundation of our platform. That the drill is pretty similar. You get the data, you process the data, you visualize the data, and then you need to have some sort of authentication, billing, charging infrastructure. So this is
the origin of the company when the consulting company came to you, and then you realized, okay, we can do this once, but we can repeat it. Or did the company already?
Yes.
Okay, that's why you founded the company.
This is why we started the company, and this is why we are building a platform to make it possible to self-serve our users, right? So we don't want to be working with every Earth observation company. Well, we would like to, right? But then we would need to hire a lot of people. So in order to enable every single Earth observation company in the world build Earth intelligence applications that are monitoring land and sea, we are building our self-serving platform where they can create stuff themselves, right? So drag and drop, low code. If you want to deploy your own image processing stuff into the cloud, sure, we do support it, but there are multiple use cases that are covered without the need for you to deploy even a small piece of code, right? You're just dragging components, combining them together, building a workflow, and it just works.
Let's come back to that in a second. I forgot to ask, so what were you guys doing before you founded the company? Were you already software engineers or data scientists or something like that? Okay.
Yeah, so our founding team, we all have been working with each other for a couple of years, and we all were working previously in software engineering domain. I've got, 15, 20 years of experience when it comes to software engineering, building software and leading teams, building products, because before Orbify, I used to be CTO at airhub.com, a B2C travel tech company. And actually, this is where I also worked with my co-founders Evelyn and Michał. And Michał have been in various roles in software engineering, everything from support roles through QA, through software engineering to product management. And Evelina was previously part of a couple of fast-paced startups, helping them to grow healthily in terms of people, headcount, and culture. So we all created big teams, big products, and took our experience from travel tech, e-commerce domain to Earth observation. Because we are all outsiders. On board, we have people who are experienced, right? So it's impossible probably to innovate without people that have a lot of experience. But what our founding team brings to the table is this fresh look on the problem.
So on the software side, I suppose there's, I guess, kind of sort of two categories. And to be fair, you have described that as a sort of the, creating the user interface and all of the sort of the piping in the back, right? The deployment into the cloud and all of that. So that's one thing. And then you have the data science part. And you guys are doing both, right? Or are you kind of taking off-the-shelf solutions for the data science part?
Right now, for the data science, we are taking solutions off the shelf because, we have only a couple of people who are experienced, who can build innovative solutions. At the same time, we are partnering with a couple of entities from the space, Earth observation space, to build unique components on our platform, so that also in terms of data science, we can bring to the table something innovative.
Understood. And there's certainly people in the space ecosystem already to partner with. So that's actually an interesting approach, sort of to divide and conquer. Now, coming back to the farmer. So, the farmers, as frankly many end customers who benefit from space data, at the end of the day, don't care that the data comes from space, right? I mean, they may think it's cool, right? Space is cool, but they don't care, right? They want to see whether their crops are healthy, or maybe some sort of more detailed, what are the nutrients, what's the water content, things like that. Now, of course, they're not sort of sensor experts, right? So they don't know that, for this use case, it's better to have mid-wave infrared. For this, it's better to have hyperspectral. How does it work in practice? Does the farmer sort of like just click on some sort of specific use case, and then the sort of your platform pulls in the right data in the background, or how does it work?
So every application is, a separate application under a separate URL. So you as a farmer, you are logging into an application that has, let's say, bestfarmingapplication.com URL, right? So you may not be even not aware that there is an Orbify platform behind it. You are taken directly to your dashboard, and no one is asking you whether you would like to be using Landsat data or planet data or whatever other constellation data, right? You are just presented with your dashboard information about, this is your field, this is what you pre-configured, this is expected yield, this is the situation, this is soil moisture, these are other parameters. You may not be even aware that someone is calculating NDVI index for you, because it may be just like, green, square showing, yes, everything is okay, or 90% okay. So the user interface that app builder is creating for the end user, app user on the platform is super simple, and it doesn't show any complexity. And this is the big difference between us and, for example, Google Earth Engine. Google Earth Engine, it's an amazing platform. I really admire what the engineers behind the product were able to build. At the same time, this is not a product that I would share with a farmer, a forester, firefighter, fisher, right? This is a great product for analysts. And what we are doing differently is that in our product, we've got this dichotomy between app builder, this power user who creates things, and end user, app user who just wants to take advantage of, just like you said, right? Take advantage of data, not necessarily space data, just data, and see what is happening in their fields, in their forest, in their part of the sea.
So just to be clear, because your company started with, working with a consulting company. Yeah. Your current product, is it directed directly to end customer,
This is B2B product. No, this is we are a B2B product.
B2B, okay. So you kind of go to intermediaries who then go to the end customer.
Yeah, so Orbify is a SaaS platform where Earth observation consultants can log in and can build their stuff on. So you can think about us like Shopify. I'm not sure if it's, I like this comparison because...
I see what you're saying, yeah.
With Shopify, it's super easy to start your e-commerce, right? If you have an idea, tomorrow I would like to start selling t-shirts. I've got this great slogan that I would like to put on it, and there is a great image, and everyone will be buying that. 20 years ago, you would have to spend a lot of time investing in e-commerce infrastructure, getting some smart, cousin of yours that knows a little bit about this PHP thing to build stuff for you. And it would take a couple of weeks. tweaks. Maybe it would be buggy, maybe it would be sluggish, maybe user interface would be perfect, but you could start selling your t-shirt. Today, if you've got this idea about selling t-shirts, you simply go to shopify.com, and within 10 minutes, your online presence, your online store is up and ready. It looks good. It has some predefined nice templates that you can use. It has integration with Stripe. It has basket. It has all those features that you as a beginning entrepreneur need, right? And you can start selling t-shirts within 10 minutes. And this is what we want to do for Earth observation. We want to make it so easy to build Earth intelligence applications like it is easy to start selling t-shirts online with Shopify.
And in terms of the data, like you mentioned, like Landsat, for example, so there's some government satellites, right? Mm-hmm. There's private companies like Planet and Satellogic and others. Planet Satellogic is just more on the optical end, but there's like radar companies and other hyperspectral companies, infrared companies. I mean, could you ingest basically anybody's data at this point?
So we have a couple of integrations in Orbify, and with those, you can take advantage of Sentinel, Landsat, and a couple of commercial providers. At the same time, I'm really happy about the integration we've got with Ellipsis Drive. I'm not sure if you and your listeners are familiar with the product, but Ellipsis Drive is like this Google Drive for Earth observation. So you can easily upload there all sorts of Earth observation geospatial data, and through the integration, you can take advantage of those in Orbify. So we build it because we are aware that we will never be able to have all the data people need, right? You may have some UAV drone imagery that you would like to take advantage. Maybe you are a more advanced consulting company, maybe you are operating some drones for your farmers, right? And you would like to take advantage of those much more detailed pictures with better resolution, etc. So you can upload this imagery to Ellipsis Drive and then connect your application to those images and get the data. So all in all, there are two ways of using data in Orbify platform. One is through the integrations we have with various vendors and integrators, and the other is just bring your own data and use them.
And so the integration is basically automatic. So whatever you would have to pay, say, to a commercial provider, let's say Planet, mm-hmm. I don't know it's Planet, but somebody like Planet, right, who would charge you on a certain basis, whether it's per square kilometer or something, basically that would all happen in the background. Whatever data is used, like the correct amount of payment would be passed on to the commercial provider.
Exactly.
Basically, yeah, it's like your Shopify comparison is actually a good one. So it's the same as when you have Shopify set up, your own online store, and you use some, drop ship supplier, the payment of the end customer gets routed automatically to the supplier. It's interesting. Yeah. In terms of the use cases, so we've talked about the farmer a lot by now, and you have mentioned some others like forestry, but what are the use cases that you're most focused on right now, and what are you most excited about?
So I think that farmer is one of the things that we are excited about. The other real use case, is actually monitoring rainforests, because, both you and I are located in Europe, right? And here forest areas are relatively small. But if you look at South America, Amazonia region, or if you look at some other countries over there, forest areas are huge, immense, right? And then monitoring these areas without satellites is really expensive and difficult. So we are working with a couple, we are lucky to work with a couple of entities, organizations who are into monitoring forests in these regions of the world. And then we are also working with a consulting company who is building vessel detection mechanism on top of Orbify platform. And also with yet another customer, we are super happy to be building an air quality monitoring application. So obviously there are some sensors on the ground, but through Sentinel-5, you can also measure concentration of different gases in the atmosphere. And then the sensors, the in situ measurements are obviously taken in urban areas. But then if you would like to understand how things are looking outside of urban areas, you are not able to do it without satellite observations. So this is why by combining in situ measurements with information coming from satellites, we can build a complete picture of how different gases, pollution is spreading in the atmosphere. So these are the use cases we are the most proud. So they are mostly revolving around agriculture and sustainability.
And then for the sustainability ones, I mean, when you mentioned rainforest, I'm guessing part of it is sort of monitoring for illegal deforestation.
Yeah.
Or it could even be legal deforestation, but just deforestation. And also for the air quality, I mean, who are the I mean, you don't have to give names, but the types of customers, is that more like governments and non-governmental like foundations or?
Exactly. So this is government agencies plus NGOs plus environmentalist activists who would like to better understand what is happening. And then going back to what you said about rainforests and legal deforestation, one of the companies we are working with is working on a really interesting concept, like a blockchain exchange for carbon producers and carbon offsetters. So you can think about, let's say, a forester who is taking care of a piece of land, or maybe not a forester, right? Maybe a normal person who owns a piece of land and cultivates this piece of land, making sure that trees are growing healthy. And the person may be tempted, well, I will cut some trees and I will immediately make some money. But on the other hand, they are offsetting carbon. So with this exchange, they could be getting paid for making sure that carbon is being sequestered from the atmosphere. So there are some really interesting concepts that are being enabled by Earth observation.
And for those kinds of use cases, do you find that the available data is sufficient at the moment? And I mean that in sort of every respect, sort of like, spatial resolution, temporal resolution, geographic coverage, or is there still sort of holes we have to fill in the Earth observation infrastructure, so to say?
I think that comparing to what was taking place, 5 years ago, situation improved immensely. So right now there is plenitude of freely available data and much more commercial constellations. You mentioned Planet, right? I think that's what Planet is doing, but also other players in the field, Maxar, and then smaller players like Axel Space, like Alba Orbital, like Such Revolution is amazing, right? If you want to monitor huge amounts of land, then you can start from using Landsats and Sentinel missions. And then once you spot something interesting, you can zoom in using commercial data. So this is one of the use cases that we are looking into as well, to kind of monitor bigger areas with lower spatial and temporal resolutions data, but which are for free. And then once we notice that there is appearing a path in the forest, right? Usually deforestation starts from a path appearing, and then the path diverges, and then there is more and more trees disappearing, right? So when we notice that, okay, in this area there is a path that appeared, then we may want to use higher resolution data for this area. So there are some really interesting concepts, and if you ask me whether the situation can be better, of course, right? It can be better. It will be better with players like Pixel, like Alba Orbital launching their small sats and collecting even more interesting data. However, I think it's good enough to build some applications that will already change how we are thinking about the world, how we are thinking about economy, how we are thinking about taking care of the environment.
And I just ask you a little bit about sort of the commercial side, about how you find customers, because I mean that's sort of not a problem, but it's one of the more challenging part for many space-related startups, because often it is technical people. Like you guys are, I think, are technical people, right, by background. You're software engineers. And suddenly you have to go out and actually, market a product and find customers for something that you weren't doing before, because if I heard it correctly, you guys were in the travel industry before. How did you find that experience? How are you guys going out and finding new customers?
Well, I'm lucky to be working with some great specialists who understand business development, who are fluent with growth marketing. So it's about building balanced team, just like you mentioned. That yes. Our founding team has mostly technical experience with building technical side of the products, but then knowing this, understanding this, pretty early on, we tried to add to our team people who are more familiar with business aspects of the type of operations. So it's about building balanced, diversified team.
Exactly. And it's particularly talking about sort of remote sensing and what we call the downstream part of remote sensing. One challenge I think people have encountered is that it really depends what vertical you're targeting, right? Whether it's agriculture or forestry, or it could even be something totally different, like mining, oil and gas, and so forth, right? Because you have to understand the customer. So I get it that you guys are B2B, so you're targeting the intermediaries, and so that helps you in that you don't have to deal with the end customers, but you still have to kind of understand, for example, okay, who are the important intermediaries for, I don't know, forestry or something like that. How did you go about figuring that out?
So this is the reason why we are focusing on some specific verticals, which is agriculture and sustainability. You mentioned a couple of other interesting use cases like infrastructure monitoring, like mining, like there is urban monitoring, right? There are many things that can be done with Earth observation, but we are focusing on agriculture and sustainability for two reasons. One is exactly like you said, to have the same language with our users, understand what they need from us, because we are still in very early stages of building the platform. So we still have a long way to go. We still are learning a lot from our users. So this is why we are focusing on those that we understand. And then also it's about the other thing that we touched base early on in the interview, which is about data analytics. So if we are focusing on agriculture and sustainability, we can implement in the platform analytical components that can be used across different use cases. If you are working with foresters and farmers, there are a lot of similarities between those use cases, right? On the other hand, if you are working with urban monitoring, there is not that much overlap between farming and urban monitoring. So this is why we are simply right now focusing on certain use cases, and then when we are happy with how the platform works, when our users are happy about how the platform works for their domains, then we will be ready to scale to say urban monitoring or infrastructure monitoring.
Mm-hmm. And then what's the revenue model? How do you charge for this? I guess your customers who are intermediaries are going to charge the end customers in a certain way. And is it like a revenue share, or how does that work?
We are a SaaS product, and fees are based on the usage. So what was very important for us is that Orbify needs to be free to start, right? We don't want to charge you, I don't know, a couple €100 just to log into the platform.
Oh, so it's a freemium model.
Exactly, it's a freemium product. You can build your application for free. You can even give it to a couple of your users for free, because we are granting you with some amount of free credits on the platform. At the same time, once you get some traction, once you start consuming more resources, then we are charging you for how much resources you use. So it's not that much about what you will build on the platform. It's more about how much CPU, how much storage, how much data you are processing.
So once more, actually, your comparison with Shopify is quite a good one.
Yeah, at the same time, Shopify offers you a couple of models, right? Because there is, I think, also some revenue share option. But yeah, in a sense, you're right.
Yeah, in the basic, Shopify model. Good. And I guess another sort of nice thing about your business model is then there's always this, sort of remaining stereotype about space-related business models that are all horribly expensive, long-term, and capital-intensive. But I guess you guys are on the sort of like extreme other end of this, because you're basically your SaaS business, right? You basically have no capital intensity.
This is one of the things that our clients find really important, that we are turning CapEx, capital expenditures, into OpEx, operational expenditures, right? So without Orbify, if you want to build your product from scratch, then you need to invest a lot into building the product. Off the top of my head, these are numbers like 50,000, 100,000 euro just to have something working, just to have a decent MVP. And then with Orbify, you log in, you upload your code, right? So we are assuming that you are coming with some interesting algorithms because you are a consultant. So you already know how to process data. But after that, magic is happening for you, and then you are only paying when users are using your product.
Yeah, so you're correct. You're also reducing the capital intensity of your customers, but I meant for Orbify itself, right? You're not a capital-intensive business because you're data, like your software business.
Yeah,
right?
That's true. That's true. Yeah. We don't have any satellites on our own, so it doesn't require millions of euro investment upfront. That's correct.
You basically need to pay the software engineers, and then you have obviously the OpEx for sort of resources you use on the computing side. But so how does that translate into financing? How is the business financed?
We collected our first round of financing a couple of months ago, and for now we are super happy with the round we collected, and we are developing the business. At the same time, there is some revenue already appearing here and there. So this validates our assumptions, and we'll see how it goes.
And was this a venture capital round or angel?
Yes, venture capital.
And what are you going to use that money for?
Of course, building the platform, and once we see some traction, then growing the user base. So these are like you said, right? Mostly it's about the team funding really great people and making sure that they are happy in the company.
Terrific. And look, it's a really interesting business, and I can just off the top of my head think of various sort of space startups in the ecosystem, upstream EO companies who are deploying certain sensors which are very relevant for agriculture, who may want to talk to you about integrating their product. But beyond the business, one other thing I wanted to talk to you about as we're winding down the interview is where you're based. Where are you based, Jakub?
I'm personally based in Kraków, Poland, but we are building a European company. So there are people based in Barcelona, there are people based in Düsseldorf, there are people based in a couple of other cities in Poland, like Gdańsk, Lublin. The reason why I'm saying European is that being in the same time zone is important for us, because I worked for some US companies, and then 7-9 hour difference is really difficult, right? But then as long as we are in the same time zone, the difference doesn't play that much of a role. We are trying to meet every couple of months and spend a couple of days together brainstorming about different topics, taking time to build the proper team, proper organization culture, but we are distributed.
Yeah, so you're a typical sort of like pandemic, post-pandemic, multi-location, remote team. I get that. I'm going to use the hook anyway, since you are based in Krakow, and because I wanted to ask you about sort of the Polish space ecosystem, because we haven't had anybody from Poland on before. I was curious about sort of what the ecosystems beyond the really well-known ecosystem, because there's always a lot of people from Silicon Valley, maybe from other like established space ecosystems like Luxembourg or Toulouse in France or Harvard in the UK. So if you don't mind, do you want to just talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the Polish space ecosystem, sort of in terms of startups, VC activity, how the government looks at it?
I think that Polish space ecosystem is really growing recently. So maybe we don't have companies like Maxar or Planet, but Sat Revolution is doing some really interesting things with their small sats and optical constellation. The vision that the CEO has is that in a couple of years they will be able to transmit real-time images from any spot on the planet. So I'm really looking forward to it, and this would enrich Orbify offering a lot. In addition to such revolution, there are a lot of analytical companies that are building stuff for space, like Satim, like others. There are also a couple of companies who have their development offices in Poland, like Apsiski, a French company that has their business development and a couple of engineers in Poland. So this is growing really nicely. And then when it comes to VCs, we've got a couple of VCs who are based in Poland, but looking at Europe and investing in various startups. So like OTB Ventures, I think that you might have heard about them because they are pretty active in space. So they have offices, they have people in Poland. And when it comes to governments, they are trying to help. They are doing their best. We've got Polish Space Agency, who is, of course, supporting Polish startups and trying to animate the scene, Space Technologies Cluster, etc. So, I don't have that much comparison, right? So it's difficult for me to say, things in Poland are this way and in Switzerland are that way, because I didn't do that much business in Switzerland. But I'm really happy to be here in Poland.
And is there any particular place in Poland where the activity is more concentrated, or is it distributed?
I think Warsaw, the capital, is where there is a lot of things happening, and then Kraków being the second biggest city and the city that probably has the most engineers is also a very interesting place to be in. But I'm biased, right? I'm living in Kraków. I like the city. I know the startup scene over here. So there is this availability bias on my side. I can tell you about lots of interesting companies that are operating from Kraków.
Sure. Let me ask you sort of the typical last two questions I ask. One is, so by now you have a little bit of knowledge of the space ecosystem, I assume. If you weren't doing Orbify, is there something else that you think is a really interesting opportunity in the space sector that you would be looking at as an entrepreneur?
Well, I think that space mining is a super interesting thing, and this is actually one of the things that we have somewhere very, very far on our radar to be able to dig into this. But it's also capital intensive, right? So this is one of those industries where without $1 billion investment, probably you shouldn't even start thinking about it. So maybe in I don't know, 10, 12 years, Orbify will be one of those companies that are looking into asteroids using our amazing platform to collect data about asteroids and deciding, okay, we should be sending our robots to mine over there.
Yeah, that's certainly the other end of the capital intensity spectrum from your current business.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, this is why we didn't start from this, right? But looking at it from what is interesting, what is amazing, what would enable people to really live in space. Because for me, this is the important thing. That mining is not only about having fun, not only about sending tourists to space, but mining is about making it possible for humans to actually live in space, right? So if you are able to mine water, if you are able to mine some 3D printers filaments, if you're able to mine hydrogen, then you become independent from supplies delivered from the Earth. And this is probably where we need to go if you would like to become a species that is independent from our mother planet. Okay,
and another thing, talking about space mining, you sort of that leads us to the final question, which is very much about science fiction. Do you like science fiction? And if yes,
of course.
What kind of science fiction do you like? And it could be anything. It could be a movie, it could be TV series, it could be books.
I grew up watching Star Wars. So probably if you ask me about science fiction, this is the first thing that comes to my mind. But actually, one of the things that made the biggest impact on myself is prose of Andy Weir. I really, really enjoyed Project Hail Mary and The Martian, because these books are like, you have read them, right? You know them.
Yes.
And I suppose that all your listeners know them because they are really, really popular. But what I really like about them is that the hero, the main character, is confronted with a lot of difficulties, right? And you are reading the book and oh crap, he will not make it. He will die. And then he's using his mind, he's using his smarts, knowledge to overcome all of those challenges. So to me, it's like, wow, this is, when we are using our mind, when we are thinking, we can solve so many different problems.
Okay, and I do agree. Those are very interesting books. Now, I have to come back to actually and give a shout out to Polish science fiction because, as I mentioned before, the interview we were talking, I also have a Polish connection. And how about Stanislaw Lem?
No, of course. His prose is something that I read a lot when I was younger. Solaris and Invincible are some books that I very much they impacted me as a kid a lot. So it's definitely a writer I could recommend to anyone. Although, it's really interesting, right? Because when you're reading Stanislaw Lem books, they were written, 50, 60 years ago. So his impression, how things will be looking was a little bit different, but at the same time, it's very actual. So in one of the books, you will be reading about a character who is using some sort of a glass table on which letters are appearing, and he's reading newspapers this way because there are no newspapers printed on paper, for example.
Like a giant iPad, basically.
It's exactly, or a Kindle. So he had really amazing imagination. Stanislaw Lem is a really great author, for sure.
That's a great note to finish off on. And yes, I haven't read anything but Solaris I found absolutely fascinating from the sort of imagination point of view. And it has been made into interesting movies as well, actually, Russian movies.
It was a nice movie. Invincible also is a great book because it's about collective intelligence. So this is something that's also definitely worth reading.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for being on today. Good luck with Orbify.
Well, thank you much, Raphael, for the interview. Thanks for having me here and amazing questions.
All the best. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap for another nominal episode of the Space Business Podcast. Once more, if you enjoyed this, please leave us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platforms such as Apple or Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter at podcast_space. You can support us at www.patreon.com/Space Business Podcast. Lastly, if you have any feedback, including ideas for guests, and that may include yourself if you have an interesting space story to tell, or interested in being a sponsor, drop us an email at spacebusinesspodcast@gmail.com. See you for the next episode.